When we think about getting older, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For a lot of us, it's about things ending. But social science, it tells a completely different story. Later life isn't just an epilogue, it's a whole new chapter, a really complex and important stage of our development, with its own challenges and, believe it or not, its own opportunities for growth. So in this explainer, we're going to break down what the science says about actually thriving in our later years. We'll start inside the mind, looking at the psychology of it all. Then we'll get to what I think is the most important concept for well-being. After that, we'll see how it all applies to retirement. And finally, we'll talk about one of the biggest questions, where to call home. And that really brings us to the big question, right? What is the secret to a happy, meaningful later life? It's not just about getting lucky. As we're about to see, it's all about understanding the dynamic dance between who we are on the inside and the world we live in. Okay, let's dive right in. The very first piece of this puzzle is what's going on internally, in our minds. It really starts with a process of looking back, taking stock and trying to make sense of the whole journey. The brilliant psychologist Erik Erikson had a powerful way of thinking about this. He said that as we get older, we all do this kind of life review, and it tends to lead us to one of two places. On one side, you have integrity. That's the feeling that, yeah, my life had meaning, it was productive, it made sense. On the other side, though, is despair. This feeling of regret, of meaninglessness, and maybe even blaming others for how things turned out. But what about day-to-day life? Well, there's this really cool idea called continuity theory. It basically says that we're all constantly trying to find this perfect balance. See, if there's too much routine, life gets boring, right? But if there's way too much change and chaos, we get completely stressed out. So the goal is to hit that sweet spot where things are predictable enough to feel safe, but there are just enough new challenges to keep life interesting. And this idea of a sweet spot is so important, it gets its very own section. In fact, this next concept is probably the single most powerful framework for understanding well-being, not just for older adults, but for anyone at any age. Let's build it together, piece by piece. First, we have what social scientists call competence. It sounds a bit technical, but it's really just the sum of your abilities. It's the upper limit of what you can do. We're talking everything from physical health and how well you can move, to your brain power, and even your emotional grit, what they call ego strength. It's basically everything you're working with. Now, the other half of this equation is something called environmental press. Think of this as everything the world asks of you. It can be physical, like needing to climb a steep flight of stairs. It could be interpersonal, like having to deal with a tricky family situation. Or it can be social, like trying to navigate a crowded, noisy store. It's all the demands from the outside. Okay, so let's see the magic that happens when you put these two things together. You plot your competence, your abilities, on the vertical axis, and you plot the environmental press, the demands, on the horizontal one. And what you get is this amazing model. You see that diagonal path right through the middle? That is the goal. That's the sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone, where your abilities are a perfect match for the challenges you're facing. That's where we thrive. And this chart breaks it down even more. When the demands are just a little bit below your abilities, you're in the zone of maximum comfort. It's easy, it's relaxing. But when the demands are just a little bit above your competence, you're pushed into the zone of maximum performance. That's where you grow. The real trouble starts when you get way out on the edges, where things are either way too hard and stressful or way too easy and mind-numbingly boring. So now that we have this fantastic model in our back pocket, let's apply it to one of the biggest transitions anyone can face, retirement. How do you find your sweet spot when the entire structure of your day just disappears? The classic image of retirement is often tied up with money worries, kind of like what you see in this first cartoon. But the modern view, which the second picture just captures perfectly, is so different. It's all about being active and engaged. Maybe you're even too busy for the grandkids because you've got your mountain biking club to get to. So what's the difference between a great retirement and a tough one? Well, the research keeps pointing back to these four pillars. Of course, financial security and good health are absolutely huge, but just as crucial are having a strong social circle, and this last one is key, having a source of motivation that comes from inside you, a purpose, a reason to get out of bed in the morning. All right, let's use our sweet spot framework one more time to look at another massive decision, where to live. Because the ultimate goal is to find an environment where that press, those demands, are a good match for a person's competence. First off, let's look at the actual numbers, which might surprise you. There's this common idea that most older adults eventually live in nursing homes. But look at the data. For people between 65 and 85, it's only about 5%. Now, that number does jump way up for those who live past 85, but the overall picture is a lot more complex than we tend to think. So here's the bottom line. It doesn't matter if someone is aging in their own home or in assisted living or in a nursing home. The number one guiding principle for making it a good experience is the same: person-centered planning. The whole focus has to be on giving that individual as much personal control as possible. You see, it ties right back to balancing their competence with the environmental press. And for anyone who has a loved one in a care facility, this is some of the most practical advice you can get. A great visit isn't just about showing up. It's about letting them call the shots. It's about really listening, even if you've heard the story before. It's about doing something together, bringing the energy of kids around, and engaging all the senses. This is stuff you can use tomorrow. And this quote just nails it. It really sums up the whole philosophy we've been talking about. The goal, whenever possible, is for people to stay in a familiar place where they feel like they are still in the driver's seat of their own life. I mean, that's the heart of dignity and well-being, isn't it? Which brings us to our final thought. This entire journey through the social science of later life is really about a universal concept: that hunt for the perfect balance between what we can do and what the world asks of us. So the real question to take away from this isn't just about aging. It's for you right now, no matter how old you are. Are you living in your sweet spot? And what's one small thing you could do to get a little bit closer?